Want to know something interesting? Up until this year, I really haven't had much experience with Batman. Obviously, I'd heard a bunch of people talking about Batman on the internet, a lot in fact, but the only Batman-related media that I had consumed firsthand at that point was Dark Knight Rises. But that all changed this year when I played the Arkham games, all 4 of them in fact. Even before going into this series, I knew that these games were widely considered to be some of the best licensed games around, and you know what? I'm not arguing. What I am going to do here today is compare the 4 of them. The way I'll be doing this is the same way that Josh Scorcher did his 4-way versus rant. First place gets 4 points, second place gets 3 points, third place gets 2 points, and fourth place only gets 1 point. Now, one thing I should probably clear up right off the bat is that while the combat and the stealth are really big parts of these games, they're also pretty similar in each one, so it'd be kinda hard to compare them. So just don't be surprised when you don't see those things as categories. One more thing to clear up though before we start is that I will be spoiling all of these games for the sake of some of these categories. So if you got a problem with that, then you should probably stop the video right now. For those of you who are still here, let's begin. Since this is Batman we're talking about, the story's obviously going to play a big part in these games. Or at least I'm assuming that's what it means. Like I said before, I don't exactly have much experience with Batman outside of these games. As for which game has the best story, I honestly think I would have to give this to Arkham Knight. It basically involves Scarecrow developing a newer, more potent fear toxin and unleashing it on Gotham. This evacuation led all the iconic Batman villains to take control of Gotham, but not before the Arkham Knight swoops in with his huge militia. Throughout the game, less and less people start to trust Batman. Not to mention, thanks to a combination of Joker's blood running through his veins and Scarecrow's fear toxin, Joker is starting to take over Batman's mind. All those elements really come together and give a good sense of finality to the Arkham saga. Arkham City also has a good plot, having 2 things really going on at once. Basically, Joker injected his poisoned blood into Batman's bloodstream, so Batman needs to go find the cure before the end of the night or else he'll die. On the other side of things, you've got Hugo Strange running the prison city that you're stuck in and is planning on unleashing something called Protocol 10 at the end of the night. Both these are good plot threads. My only issue is the way they go about the progression in it. Don't get me wrong, it makes sense to focus on getting the cure for the disease that's going to kill Batman. But with each mission objective, they make it seem like you're gonna get the cure at the end of it just for it to be pulled away from you at the last second. Meanwhile, the other plot keeps getting pushed into the background until Protocol 10 actually begins. I get that this is a minor complaint, but it still bugs me. However, within the last few missions, the story really starts to get kicked into high gear, so it makes up for it. Arkham Asylum has a really simple plot. Joker takes over Arkham Asylum. It's a pretty simple concept, but at the same time, it's also a really awesome concept. Taking back the Asylum from Joker is enough for me, but they also add in him using this Titan formula to create super-powered goons. And then there's Arkham Origins. A lot of people took issue with this game's story because it has 8 assassins going to kill Batman, but it's a prequel, so you know he's going to survive. However, I saw it less as trying to build suspense and more just getting you hyped up for some awesome boss fights and some interesting encounters. My problem with the mercenary plot is that they barely focused on it. Most of the time they're focusing on either the introduction of the Joker or Batman's relationship with the GCPD. Now, don't get me wrong, those aren't bad things to focus on in a prequel to the Arkham games, but when you have such an awesome plot like 8 assassins hunting Batman down, you don't just push that into the background. But this game has a moment in its story so stupid that I can't just ignore it. At one point in the game, they try to make it look like Alfred's dying, but if you've played Arkham City, then you would know that Alfred's in that, so obviously he survives here. But what's a good superhero story without good villains? Well, I guess it will be a Marvel movie, but that's beside the point. The Batman Arkham games really do have some great villains. Just to make things a little bit easier on myself, I'm only going to be counting villains who affect the main story, no side quest exclusive villains. And out of all of them, I really think Arkham City wins here. For the sequel, I really think they did a good job pushing Joker into the background just the right amount. Basically making it so that he's still a major threat, but kind of puts him on equal footing with some of the the other villains. As for the other villains, Raish was alright, I liked Mr. Freeze, and I thought Penguin was pretty entertaining. But for me, the highlight had to be Hugo Strange. His calm, collected nature, coupled with his power over the entire city, really made him feel intimidating. Not to mention, the secret dialogue reels you hear between him and the other inmates really makes it feel like he's the smartest person there, aside from the Joker. Coming in a close second, we have Arkham Asylum, which took the exact opposite approach and just made the Joker the center of everything. I know that might sound hypocritical seeing as what I just said about Arkham City, but I think it's really cool that Joker's the one running the entire show, so long as they weren't going to do that for every game. Joker's basically an ever-present force throughout the game, which is a good thing because he's really well written and voiced. But just to make sure you didn't get sick of Joker, they added in a couple other villains for variety's sake, such as Poison Ivy, Killer Croc, Zsasz, and Bane. Out of the non-Joker villains in this game, my personal favorites were Harley Quinn, and of course the one that no one ever forgets, Scarecrow. Scarecrow's fear toxin segments truly were some of the most memorable parts of the game. Arkham Knight had 3 villains, and I think that the game did a good job of portraying each of them as about an equal threat to you. Scarecrow was my least favorite out of the 3. I didn't find him bad, but I didn't find him as interesting as he was in Arkham Asylum, and despite being the guy whose gimmick is fear, I found Hugo Strange more intimidating. I also like the original way that they worked Joker into this game. He just randomly appears constantly, making it clear that he's trying to take over Batman's brain. I think the thing I like most about this is the fact that the other villains have no clue this is going on. But lastly, we have the villain that this game was named after, the Arkham Knight. I know that a lot of people say that the plot twist as to who he really was predictable, and since I knew about it going in, I would never be able to gauge that myself. But regardless of that, I really liked this guy's character. I like the idea that he knows Batman so well that he keeps pointing out to his goons the strategies to defeat it. Not to mention, you can get the sense that behind the mask, he is just desperate to prove that he's better than Batman. And in last place again, we have Arkham Origins. Okay, let's start off with Penguin. It didn't really feel like there was much of a reason he needed to be in the game. He honestly felt shoehorned in, which wouldn't be so bad if it weren't for, like I said before, you have these 8 assassins that you could be focusing on, but instead you're devoting attention to a guy from the last game who doesn't even need to be here. And with these 8 assassins, let's talk about them. 2 of these 8 assassins you only fight in side quests, and 1 of them you don't even get to fight at all. In fact, out of these 8 assassins, I would argue that only 2 of them have a significant impact on the story outside of giving you an item or a boss fight. Those 2 being Firefly and Bane. But ranting aside, excluding Anarchy, there were 3 villains in this game that I liked. The first of which is this weapons dealer guy named Loose Lips. He doesn't really do all that much, but I found him entertaining. The second of which is Joker, who's been getting praise all throughout this segment because let's face it, he's just that good of a villain. I will admit, I was kinda disappointed that they resorted to throwing in Joker again instead of trying to let Black Mask function as the main antagonist, but at the same time, Joker still was a lot of fun to watch, just like in all the other games. And lastly, we have Bane. Bane was freaking awesome in this game. He was tough, he was smart, and his dynamic with the Joker was unlike any of the other characters in the series. It was half, yeah, I'm working for you, but I'm way better than all the other assassins, and half, screw you, El Payaso, I'm calling my own shots from now on. So yeah, even though Arkham Origins was the weakest in terms of villains, they still had some good ones. The reason why I'm not just making this category gadgets is because of the fact that Arkham Asylum would lose by default because all the games after it had all of Arkham Asylum's gadgets and then some. Arkham Knight wins this one. Why? Batmobile. Need I say more? Okay, given the nature of this video, I probably should say more, which I'm going to do right now. The Batmobile added a whole new layer to the gameplay with its awesome tank battles, some puzzle solving uses, or just driving around. I will admit, there were parts of the game where I found the Batmobile far more frustrating than fun, but overall I would say it's a welcome addition. But that's not the only gadget they added. They also have the voice synthesizer, which I thought was an interesting idea and a fun gadget to play around with. And last but not least, we have the remote control hacking device. I know it's kind of similar to the cryptographic sequencer, but the sheer amount of things you can do with it, coupled with the fact that you can do it at a distance, makes this one of my favorite items in the series. Up next is Arkham Asylum, which I gotta give it credit because all the gadgets it introduced appeared in all the later Arkham games. items. And for the most part, this is good. The best highlight, of course, being the explosive gel, which, let's face it, if you think of an item from the Arkham games, you think of the explosive gel. Although the one thing to keep in mind is that while Arkham Asylum may have introduced a bunch of awesome stuff, it also introduced the remote control Batarang. Maybe it's just me, but I friggin' hate that item. Most of the items that Arkham Origins introduced were just variations off of items from past games, but there was one item I really liked: the shock gloves. And with Arkham City, while I didn't really hate any of the new items, none of them really stood out to me either. Ignoring the smoke pellets, the only new item that I really used that much was the remote electrical charge, and even then, that's kinda just cause the game requires you to use it a lot. For the sake of this category, since I haven't played all the side quests, I'm going to be judging it based on how the games handled the side quests, rather than the individual side quests themselves. In other words, how much I felt like doing the side quests when I was playing the game. And no questions asked, this category has to go to Arkham Knight. The way they presented the side quests really motivated me to go after them, and most of them fell into one of two categories: either A, taking back Gotham from the Arkham Knight's militia, or B, taking down the iconic Batman villains. I think the best part is that they require you to do the beginning of most of these side quest chains, which gives you an idea of what you're going to be doing if you decide to continue the side quest. Arkham Origins wasn't bad in this department either, as it showed you the beginning of a different side quest every time you completed a major area. Arkham City, I'm not going to lie, I never felt really motivated to do any of the side quests because they seemed really out of the way, which is a shame because it looks like I missed some pretty good stuff. And Arkham Asylum, the only side quest it really had was collecting the Riddler trophies, so yeah, it loses here. Okay, this segment shouldn't require any explanation to it whatsoever, just which game overall has the best bosses. And I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say I don't think I'm going to be shocking anyone when I say that Arkham City has the best bosses. At worst, you have Solomon Grundy, who's not even bad, he's just kind of meh. And as for the other bosses, you got Clayface, who granted is pretty easy for a final boss, but still is pretty fun. Ra's al Ghul's fight, which looks freaking amazing, and the king of them all, Mr. Freeze, who's in my top 5 favorite bosses of all time. Here, I'll link you to a video where I go into more depth as to why this fight's so good. Arkham Origins, on the other hand, is a bit more of a mixed bag. At the bottom, you got Deathstroke. While this fight does look cool, late in the fight, the game will start trapping you in impossible quick-time events. Or at least I thought they were impossible. Let me know if there's a way to succeed in them. In the middle, you got Killer Croc and Copperhead, who were just kind of meh. And for the good ones, you got Firefly and both fights with Bane, particularly the second one. Arkham Knight barely did anything that could even be considered a boss, aside from the excavator, the occasional helicopter battle, and maybe Jason Todd. But if that's the case, then why isn't Arkham Knight at the bottom? Because, ladies and gentlemen, Batman Arkham Asylum has quite possibly the worst lineup of bosses in any video game I've ever played. The only game I've played that could possibly be worse is Gravity Falls Legend of the Gnome Gemulets, because in that game, every boss is just a slightly harder version of the last one. So what's so bad about these bosses? Let's go through them, shall we? The first boss basically just charges at you and you have to throw a Batarang at him, and then he hits the wall and then you attack him. Then there's Bane, who has the exact same strategy except for the fact that there are other enemies in the room and he has more health. But then get this, they come up with the most creative idea of them all. Have you fight the same boss again, except there's 2 of them in the room instead of just 1. Don't get me wrong, I totally get why people hate refighting boss fights, but what's worse is when every boss fight is just refighting the same boss fight, only slightly harder. Then you get to the fight with Poison Ivy, which I actually enjoyed. Not that the fight's good, it's pretty mediocre. I just liked it because it was something different. It's really the equivalent of rejoicing that you get to eat at McDonald's after being forced to eat out of a dumpster for a week. And then we get to Joker, the most infamous boss in the series and one of the most infamous final bosses in all of gaming. That last claim might have been a bit bold, but I doubt I'm off by much. Now, I'm not going to go into everything that makes this boss fight terrible because it would take forever for me to do that. Listen, sometime next year I'm going to be remaking my top 10 least favorite bosses, and you can bet that Joker's going to be on it. I'll go over why I hate this boss fight so much there. As for right now, I think what I've already said should give you a clear enough picture on how I feel about this boss. So it looks like Arkham Knight wins. Even before I started making this, I pretty much knew either Arkham Knight or Arkham City was going to win. And you know, I still think I prefer Arkham City, but it's a pretty close call. The way I see it, Arkham City's kind of like the video game equivalent of The Dark Knight. That's kind of weird coming from a guy who's never seen The Dark Knight, but I know its reputation. Both of which are mostly considered to be the best in their respective Batman saga, as well as being considered classics in the superhero genre and to a lesser extent their respective mediums. Of course, that's not to fault Arkham Knight, you know, the game that actually won by my scoring, because it's a really good game as well. It added a lot of new things to the series, as well as serving as a satisfying conclusion to the Arkham saga. Arkham Asylum was fantastic as well, basically serving to say, hey, Batman is back in gaming and he means business this time. Not to mention, the game felt different than all the others in the saga, having a more claustrophobic and creepy atmosphere, which is something I can appreciate. I mean, it's not like that kind of thing reminds me of any other games I like. That would be ridiculous. The only game in the series I didn't really like that much was Arkham Origins, and even still, it's a good game. It's just that, at least in my opinion, it's not up on the same level as the other three. I guess the moral of the story here is play the Arkham games. They're friggin' awesome. Even if you're not that big a fan of Batman, I still recommend checking them out. I mean, I wasn't really that big a Batman buff before playing these games, and now look at me. I'm making a versus rant comparing the four of them. Or I guess made a versus rant on them, because I kinda just stopped comparing them. I recommend going in order and maybe skipping Arkham Origins if you don't really like it that much. I am Defoffilizer, and they made another Batman game already? Sheesh, Batman really is popular. I'll see you in the next video where I hopefully make statements that are significantly less obvious than that one.